Hi, you're listening to Harmony Unlocked, where I help you find a perfect balance between work, life, and love. This is Taylor Mountain, and I'm the host of the show. Now, today's episode is called Understanding Boundaries, right? So, while boundaries empower individuals to set personal limits and prioritize self respect, rules can inadvertently lead to control and conflict. So I want you to keep that in mind as we focus on boundaries versus, say, rules, because there are differences between the two. All right. So, what is a boundary? A boundary is an invisible line that defines what behaviors are acceptable for an individual. So, essentially, this is something that one person makes that is for someone else to let them know what is acceptable or unacceptable. Some more information about what are boundaries. So, not everyone has the same boundaries, and most people aren't capable of guessing what another person's boundaries may be. So, you may have a sibling that lives in the same house with you, but just because they're right there doesn't mean that you know exactly what their boundaries are. Okay. So, and something to keep in mind that everyone hopefully has boundaries, but we can't necessarily guess what the boundaries are for any person. So we have to wait till they tell us. Now, people who may have a lower emotional intelligence may not necessarily have boundaries because there's more acceptance of things to happen rather than prioritizing their emotions, their feelings, their thoughts, all of that. Okay. So the higher the emotional intelligence, the more likely you are to have healthy boundaries for yourself. Now, personal boundaries need to be clearly communicated. Again, so these need to be verbalized, written down, depending on what it is. But by doing something that might be passive aggressive or passive or aggressive doesn't necessarily mean that a personal boundary is communicated. Now, this is also keeping in mind that we're talking about situations between people that do have respect for each other versus if there's a situation where it might even be, say, unfortunately, sexual assault, where you do need to be aggressive, you do need to be as loud as you can. But when we're looking at the general topic of boundaries, we do need to make sure that these personal boundaries are clearly communicated, which means that you're saying, hey, Mike, I do not like blank. Or, hey, Michelle, can you please knock on my door before you come in? Versus, stop coming in my room. Or, don't do that. Or, I hate it when you dot, dot, dot. So, if you're able to at least say, Mike, I don't like when you do these things. Can you please respect my boundaries? Making it very clear that that's what it is. Either way, a person should still respect the reaction that might be coming out of you. But if you're able to kind of set these boundaries beforehand or make them clear like that, it just helps overall. All right. So, setting boundaries is about communicating your needs for healthy interactions with someone else. Not everyone may like or understand your boundaries or even the reasons for you setting them, and that's okay. All right. So, next time you're like saying, I need to make sure that this stops happening or this person listens to me, it's going to be maybe hard for that other person. It might even be hard for you, but just remember that that is okay. And it's just something that is expected, right? If you don't set those boundaries, you can't expect them to be followed. Okay. So if you are saying, please knock on my door before you enter my office, that is very clear for somebody to follow, whether you say it to them in person, in writing, whatever it is. However, if it is just a yelling at them or get out of my office or stop doing that, they may still maybe avoid, or they may continue doing what they're doing, which is very bold of them, and just walk on right into your room. So you have to make sure that you're saying these things, and if you don't, the less chance of that person to follow that particular boundary that you have set. Now, it often takes courage and strength to set boundaries. And it can be scary for what we typically learn at home. And I say that because you're living in a close space with people who are likely, related to you, and the lines are blurred a little bit differently than it might be for a stranger or for a neighbor, somebody else. So you may have that sibling that just does pop into your room and you're just used to that. Your parent may continually pop into your room. However, you may not necessarily like that. So it's really hard to say, hey, mom, or hey, brother, could you knock? Could you give me a heads up when you're coming in? Now, that is certainly a simple way of saying all of this, and I'm not trying to say that any of this is that easy, but it does take courage and strength to let others know what you are open to accepting, what you are open to doing, and then also really saying what you're not comfortable doing. Okay? So this isn't easy. And for those areas where you have created boundaries, that's great. You're taking those steps to make sure that you are protecting your emotional space, your physical space, all of that. Now, if someone chooses to violate your boundaries after you've given these guidelines, you'd be within your right to create further distance between yourself and that person, which again kind of goes with that it taking courage and strength to set these boundaries, because not everybody agrees with your boundaries. Not everybody wants to have some guideline against them when they've had so much access to you for however long. So if it is necessary for you to create distance between yourself and that person who is violating your boundaries, that might be what's best. You want the people to respect you and the people that are around you to let you know that they hear you, that they want to make sure that they have a healthy relationship with you. So it's just information to keep in mind. And a reminder, no one has the right to tread on your boundaries, but it's also good to keep in mind that you, likewise, don't have the right to tread on someone else's. Why? Because not everybody has the same boundaries, and we do need to check in with them to find out what they are comfortable with. Now, as you're listening, it might be good too to think of what are some of your boundaries, and we'll be talking about what are healthy boundaries versus unhealthy boundaries, as well as different types of boundaries, what they may look like, and what it might sound like. So keep that in mind. Hopefully, your questions are answered. If not, you can always reach out to me at yourtailoredliving@gmail.com. All right. Now, why are boundaries important? Now, boundaries are a form of self care. We want to make sure that we are feeling our best as often as possible, meaning that we are rested, we are feeling energized, we have space to be ourselves, that we are able to do the things that we want to do or need to do without having to, feel controlled by somebody else or have our decisions be dictated by someone else. So boundaries, again, are a positive thing. They're a form of self care. They're a way of taking care of your mental health and ensuring that your well being is respected. For example, knowing your partner's boundaries helps you know them as a whole person. This is because respecting their limits can help them feel more safe to open up to you. Now, from there, true connection and intimacy can bloom. Some unprofessional behaviors can impact your career trajectory. So, if we are not setting up proper boundaries, or we have other people that are violating our boundaries, or we're violating their boundaries, that can hurt us in more ways than just an emotional one. Unfortunately, many people fail at proper boundaries because this may not be taught when we are younger and when we are growing up. So we're looking at maybe, even if it is like a physical touch, you might still have a family member that wants to come up and give you a big hug and squeeze you, even though it is so uncomfortable. And you also hate it because you really don't like being touched or hugged, which is completely okay. But they're like, but I'm your favorite cousin. I want to give you this bear hug. I don't understand, like, why this is an issue. It's a hug. This is what families do. But it is something that you can learn, and it just takes practice and a little bit of time. So don't give up if you are trying to set these boundaries with, say, your cousin, your sibling, your coworker, your partner, whatever it is. Keep practicing until you know that boundary is being respected. But also, if it isn't, and it's repeatedly violated, take note of that. That person isn't respecting you. Now, without boundary setting, relationships and career growth can be tough. So this can be with your time, that you are just working a lot at your job and you're not taking time to take care of yourself. You're not taking time to foster your relationships. So it can be difficult on that. Or on the other side, maybe you really do need to focus on the work that you're doing and you need to take more time to be by yourself. And people around you are not giving you support, even though you've been asking for it. Like, you want to take that next step. You still need to have boundaries set for you so you can achieve all the things that you would like to do. Also, another way that boundaries are important is by speaking up for yourself and giving others the opportunity to do the same. This is helpful for everyone. You do have to let others know what you accept and what you don't accept. And if there are people who are really just trying to start setting boundaries for themselves, allow them that space. Be supportive of them, of trying to make sure that they can take care of themselves, that they can have the boundaries necessary for them to grow and to heal. All right. So, a lot of stuff to keep in mind, but boundaries are so helpful and so important. But let's see what unhealthy boundaries might mean. So, we know that healthy boundaries are supposed to develop mutual respect and create a sense of comfort and safety. On the other end, unhealthy boundaries mean there's a lack of boundaries. These boundaries aim to control the other person. So remember in the beginning mentioning how there's a difference between rules and boundaries. This is an example. So unhealthy boundaries and are aimed to control the other person. Sometimes they are meant to manipulate the other person into doing things they don't want to do. Okay, so it can be a little confusing when you have someone that may tell you that you have to always give hugs to every family member, regardless of who it is, regardless of if you know them or not, but you have to do this. Like, okay, there's one part of, say, being friendly and kind when you're meeting someone new, but it's another thing to have your space violated when you may not really be someone that likes to hug other people, and you have this other person. Oftentimes it's a parent, just because you might be younger when you heard this, but they're telling you that you have to do something. Or if it is, say, this other person who's saying, like, you have to give me a hug, you're supposed to give me a hug, I'm your relative, this is what you're supposed to do. But if you're not someone that wants to do that, or you get a bad vibe about it, like, that should be respected as well. Now, unhealthy boundaries are a common tactic of toxic people. Again, there's more control and manipulation that is connected to these quote unquote boundaries. Let's see, at work, when a manager requires constant overtime, even when a project isn't that urgent, that is an example of an unhealthy boundary. Or say there's a coworker that doesn't respect your time off and messages you at all hours of the day. Again, an unhealthy boundary. Part of it can be how you respond to it. So say if that coworker is still messaging you, are you responding to it? Are you texting them back, giving them calls back? Does this mean that you are on vacation and now you are leaving your family and your friends to go and take care of work stuff when you took this time off? You are on vacation where you're supposed to be enjoying the sun and the sand or whatever it is. Maybe you're just hanging out at home, sleeping. Like, that's okay. You're supposed to be doing that. So in this case, maybe that healthier boundary would be not responding or reminding them, hey, I'm on vacation, so I'm not working at this time. It might be good to contact somebody else. So looking at these different aspects of it, there are these boundaries that are both helpful for you, helpful for other people, and also why we have to really take time to find out what it is that we will accept and won't accept. So, still looking at unhealthy boundaries, an unhealthy relationship with boundaries might demand too much, meaning you are not taking that space for yourself and you're just giving and giving and giving. So, there's more, I'll say, negative energy that's being used by you rather than ones to keep you focused and rested and engaged and present, all of that. Also, someone with unhealthy boundaries doesn't necessarily question how the other person feels, and their goal is to control. So, going along with how you may be feeling about something, and maybe these are major requests of another person, even though you don't want to do it, those are examples of unhealthy boundaries. And the other person isn't keeping in mind how you might feel about a situation. So, something to think about is maybe where there are some of these unhealthy boundaries, and think of it as it being that there is no line at all. There is no guideline that is set up of how to handle a certain situation. Or if you're feeling controlled by another person or kind of like forced to do something that you don't want to do, those are unhealthy boundaries. Okay. So, healthy boundaries make sure that you are comfortable, that you are safe, that you are able to be yourself, that you can ultimately like say no. And unhealthy boundaries are the ones that make you lose a lot of energy, make you agree to something when you don't want to, or maybe you find that you don't have space to voice your thoughts or opinions. And yeah, it's all kind of based on somebody else or, say, a group of people. Okay, so something to keep in mind. But we're going to move forward and look at the different types of boundaries. So there are many different types of boundaries, but for today, we're only looking at 5. So that is personal boundaries, emotional boundaries, physical boundaries, financial boundaries, and sexual boundaries. And there are more. There's like intellectual boundaries as well as material boundaries. So you may also find that online or as you're researching. But for today, we're just looking at those 5. All right. So the first boundary that we're looking at are personal boundaries. Personal boundaries should always be heard and never excluded from any relationship. So, to give you an idea of what personal boundaries can look like, here are 5 examples. So, we have ownership and agency over your financial assets. So, this is what you want to do with your money. We have the ability to stay true to your sense of self, spiritual beliefs, and passions. So, we're talking about those things that are important to you, that define you, how you view yourself, how you view the world, what you like to do. So, making sure that you're able to still be you, still be the authentic you. There's also the ability to prioritize personal time for self care. You do not always have to be at work. You do not always have to be like the best parent that never stops uh, what they're doing. Now, I'll say I'm not a parent, but what I mean by that is it is okay if you do not want to be touched. Now, that's not anything I've experienced, but I do know that that is something that mothers experience when they're just being touched all the time by their kids, maybe even with their spouse wanting to hug them and everything. It can be a lot and overwhelming if you're constantly being touched. So, it's not going to say that you are being a bad mother or bad parent by saying, "Hey, honey, can you please hold our child?" Or maybe it's asking your relative or very good friend to watch your child and like take some time to rest, shower, go to the gym, sleep, do nothing. So it's okay to take that time for yourself. Another example is the right to change your mind and preferences, whether it is in a relationship, like a romantic relationship, or a decision for something at work. It could just be your daily decision. You don't want to eat McDonald's, you would like to have Chipotle. It is okay to say no, that you don't want to do that. It's also okay for you to say, yes, I would really like to go skiing and go on this winter vacation rather than going to a sunny place, especially since we've been going to sunny places all the time. I enjoy being in a cabin, in the woods, in the snow. Like, that is okay for you to voice those things that you like and enjoy, even if it might be different from what other people are saying. Also, a personal boundary might be having that alone time with no distractions or interruptions. Now, a good example of a boundary that I like to use is how my mom would just be so tired when she got back from work. So she worked in the military and works for the government and would leave super early in the morning. Also, she could also get back home early for when I got out of school. But because she was so tired, she would say, "All right, the age that I am, that's the number of minutes that I need by myself when I first get home. Okay, that's cool. I can understand what 45 minutes means. And this was all for her. Whether it was resting or reading or just taking a moment to herself after she was in a car commuting for so long, talking to other people, making all of these um, rules or guidelines or directions and telling people what to do and making all these decisions. It was okay for her to take that time. Same thing for you. It is okay for you to have that alone time, take a break from being a parent, from being a partner, being a friend, being an employee. I know we wear so many hats and we have different obligations that come with it, but you're still you. So it's okay to take that alone time for yourself. All right. So, again, these are personal boundaries. And now we're going to look at emotional boundaries. Emotional boundaries have to do with being clear on what is and isn't yours to feel or fix. So I think this is a very important one. And what I notice, especially with a lot of my couples, is that they can also be, I guess they'll, I would say they have the same type of emotions that their partner has because there's maybe a worry that they did something to that partner for them to feel that way. And now everyone is escalated. Everyone has these strong emotions of what's going on. However, that partner could just be really tired because they stayed up really late the night before. They had to work on a project. They still had to drive into work. They still had to deal with people that might have been really annoying that day. And then get in a car, come back, deal with whatever traffic, all of that. So they could just be really tired. And it has absolutely nothing to do with their partner. So we have to keep those things in mind when it comes to emotional boundaries and how we don't have to take on the emotions of the other person that's around us, especially if it has nothing to do with us. Okay. So your emotions and emotional well being are within your control, regardless of what is happening for the other person. An emotional boundary looks like not being obliged to also be mad at the manager or drawn into the other person's frustration. As a parent, emotional boundaries can mean not letting your own mood be contingent on the mood of your child, or not getting upset when your partner doesn't follow you into a spiral of despair when watching the news. Emotional boundaries in relationships are about maintaining our individuality. So we all have our own thoughts and feelings and can care about each other without losing our sense of self. When I think about emotional boundaries, it reminds me of how there might be one person that is maybe upset a at another student. So you're in high school, just being very stereotypical, but one person maybe does something that student B dislikes. So student A and student B just don't get along for whatever reason. However, student A and student C can get along and it's okay. Student C does not have to say, well, I can't like student A because my friend student B is just, y'all don't get along. But it could just be that they have different communication styles and they had a group project and they just had different views. That doesn't have anything to do with the third person. So we're looking at how we're keeping track of how we're feeling and making sure that it's based on our own experience and not necessarily somebody else's experience. I wonder for the listeners what might be sometimes that their emotional boundaries have been crossed. Or does this mean that more emotional boundaries need to be set up? So it's okay to not have the same reaction as the person next to you, even if that's your kid, your partner, your best friend. You don't necessarily have to have that same response. But also, if, like I was saying before, if your partner is just really upset just because they had a rough day, you don't have to take on all of that energy that they have or the strong emotions, because then you're a little confused. You're like, man, I'm feeling this way, but I didn't do anything. I don't know what's going on. So it's something to keep in mind. It's hard to do because we're told that we need to show other people that we care. And one way of showing that we care might be having that same frustration or disinterest as them. But it's not necessary. You can guard your own emotions and let your partner deal with what they're dealing with and help where they may ask. Now, if they are asking you to be upset, this is where you have to be strong and voice your own boundary of saying that if this person has like ultimately violated you, and maybe there's some type of assault, there's some type of um, very mean and harsh and cruel interaction or words that are said, that is very different. But if it's just because there are some differences between you and the other person, no, partner doesn't necessarily have to feel the same way that you do. All right. Now we're looking at physical boundaries. So this one especially has to do with the relationship to other people. Some people may be comfortable with hugs or may not appreciate physical touch depending on the context. So someone might hug their family members, but that doesn't mean that they want to hug their coworker or some stranger or anything like that. So it's helpful to know what someone is comfortable with, which means that you would need to ask. Boundaries are set regarding your body, your touch, your space, what you eat and drink, and when you're active and resting. So, this physical piece has to do with who you allow into your own, like, personal space with your body. It could be who's allowed into your home, who's allowed in your car, who is allowed in, well, I was going to say family. That can be a little bit more challenging. So we'll leave that for a different time. But just think about the ones that are really put into context of a physical space with your body. And at least a good way to think about this too is there, say, a door or a wall that gives you a clear line, like a physical example of this boundary. So something to just keep in mind with that one. So again, it could be more of the the hugs or the kisses, but also to how, or like what you put into your body. It could be in your physical space and who can come into your room, into your house, and stuff like that. All right. With financial boundaries, it may be deciding with your partner to have a joint account or separate accounts. If your friends constantly choose expensive restaurants, for example, you may need to set a boundary about what you're willing to spend. But also, this means considering what your financial goals are, which was an example of the personal boundary. So we have maybe what our decisions and thoughts are or goals are related to our own finances, but then also how this looks in relation to other people, because you don't necessarily need to have a joint account with your partner, and that's okay. Or you may think that a joint account is the best route for both of you, and that's important to you. Then also, if you're dealing with other people, so this example of your friends choosing expensive restaurants, or maybe it's even this recent debate, I guess, of you go out to eat, do you split the bill? What happens when you go out and you're you're going for someone's birthday? What does this mean? Now, I've been in groups where people have split the bill equally, mainly because we all got the same amount of drinks. We all had the same amount of entrees. Maybe we split appetizers like that. But I've also had situations where I had a friend that was like, nope, I'm not buying these extra drinks, or I'm not really hungry. So, why would we make that person pay so much more when they did not order as much or even eat as much? So there are boundaries there, and it's okay if we need to put them in there with our friends, because again, it should be respected. And this is just an idea that, popped into my head, but I just think about how sometimes we do have our own personal goals, and say with friends, they may choose these things that you don't agree with, meaning they think it's okay to spend $500 each person every time you go out, but you're trying to save up for a car, a house, a trip, whatever it is. And if they see it as, you can only come out with us if you pay this, because if you don't participate in everything, then you're not being a good friend, that's one of those boundaries that's being violated. There isn't a lot of respect for you there. So even if it is with your partner, your family members, your friends, these boundaries are important. And when it comes to money too, I think that's a big part where boundaries are very important. So if anything, something to consider when being asked about money from someone else, even if it is coming up with clearing out somebody's debt or being a co-signer and those kinds of things, it's okay to have these boundaries. Hopefully they respect it, but like, we need to be able to manage our money as best as we can, and we do have to see ahead of time what we're comfortable doing and then being able to verbalize that. But I'll get off my soapbox for now. All right. So now we are lastly looking at sexual boundaries. Now, this is a very important topic because unfortunately, there are too many situations that happen to men, women, young people, non binary people, trans people, and the pain or the hurt that comes from this violation might look very different from, say, a financial one. Most likely it's related to just the fact that it's our bodies. It is our physical selves. It is maybe being touched in a certain way, from, say, hand holding, which is okay if you don't want to do that, to very unwanted sexual advances. So, something that hopefully you are talking about with your friends to just make sure that they're safe, that you're talking about with your sons or daughters, again, making sure that they're safe, that you're also keeping in mind for yourself, because unfortunately these bad things do happen even when we are trying our best to kind of stay away from that. So sorry to kind of bring down the mood a little bit, but this is part of boundaries. This is what it means to really take care of ourselves, right? So, having sexual boundaries is important in physical intimacy. It's where we're discussing what is off limits and what kind of contact you prefer. So this is all meant to help develop a trusting relationship. Setting sexual boundaries also includes prioritizing consent. So making sure that whoever you are speaking with or in relation with is respecting you, what you want, what you are okay with, what your lines are. Like, one of the other examples here is setting rules about safety. So you may be very comfortable in your skin, comfortable in your sexuality, and being around other people, but it's okay to have your limits and setting those rules about what it means for you to feel safe. And then also this means establishing communication patterns. So this one, so important that you have those clear statements of what you are okay with and not okay with. I'm speaking more to you have met somebody new or you've been dating somebody and you're now at that place where you are comfortable having more of a sexual relationship with them. It is about communication, speaking up for what you're comfortable with, what you're not comfortable with, letting them know what your limits are, all of that. For those situations outside of that, where it does lead to, say, sexual assault, that's very different in the sense of there's no respect that person seems to have for you. So do your best to still say no, to yell, to get away as much as you can. And I realize like this is a very important topic to me because unfortunately women experience this so much. So we have the sexual boundaries that are related to our own sexual needs, whether that is in a relationship or not, just making sure that you're letting the other person or persons know what you're comfortable with. All right. It is okay to say no. It is okay to say what you're comfortable with. It is okay to also stop what's happening and leave. You don't have to continue with anything. All right. All right. So these next three examples are going to look at how we may positively talk about these boundaries or what might be considered violations, but we're just looking at the emotional, physical, and sexual boundaries, all right? So for emotional boundaries, it's all about respecting and honoring the feelings and energy, knowing when to share and when not to share, and then validating the feelings of others. So a violation may be when feelings are dismissed or criticized, or when someone might be asking questions that are not appropriate for the relationship or like that level of the relationship. It might be reading or going through personal and emotional information. It might also be somebody else telling other people how you feel. Those are all violations. What you say to somebody and confidence is important and should be kind of followed. And let's see, or say reading and going through personal and emotional information. I'm pretty sure majority of us had a diary or a journal. We don't want anybody to look at any of those things. So it's not good if someone's going through any of that. Okay. We also have the physical boundaries. So that might mean that you're saying like, hey, I am really tired. I need to go and sit down. Or I'm not a big hugger. I'm a handshake person. Letting them know touch is okay to a degree. You can do a handshake. It may mean, no, I do not want you to touch me like that. Or please don't go into my room without asking first. Those are ways to establish certain boundaries. well, physical boundaries. Violations may mean that it feels like you're receiving inappropriate or unwanted touch. Maybe you're being denied your physical need, like to say, sit down because you're feeling dizzy. Or it may mean the most severe violations result in serious physical abuse or neglect. Okay. And then we have the sexual boundaries. It's saying no to things that you do not like or that hurt. It is you protecting the privacy of the other person. It is saying or asking, do you want to try something different? Or tell me what you like or dislike. It might also sound like, I don't like that. Let's not have sex now. Some violations may be, say, sulking, punishing, or getting angry if someone does not want to have sex. It may be not asking for consent. It might also be lying about contraceptive use. And unfortunately, it can still be about unwanted touch, assault, or rape. All right? So, the last few things to look at. How do we set these boundaries? All right? So, we need to recognize that you deserve to be treated with respect because you are a worthwhile person. Second, take a second to define and acknowledge what boundaries you may or may not have already set in your relationship. You might have some boundaries that are set with what happens in the morning. Not everybody is a morning person, so maybe you like to rest. So maybe that is saying to your partner, please don't wake me up in the morning. I need my sleep, even though they probably want to talk to you. But I am an advocate for rest and sleep. So if it is like you have gone or you have like a later work time and maybe you don't get in until midnight, whereas your partner gets in at the typical like 5 o'clock. So you do need to sleep. It may really be that important. I will say though, if it is you both have a similar schedule and you also got your 8 hours of sleep or something, I mean, it's okay to tell your partner goodbye. But we're looking at things like that of say you have that set up and you're able to talk through those things, or maybe something that you do want to set up is that when you get home you still might need some time in space just to be alone with your thoughts. So it's okay if you need to set aside some time for that or do some kind of activity that you like to do alone, whether it is going to work out, reading a book, doing art, um, whatever, really. But you can say that that space is needed. And also let your partner know that they can have that time too. It's okay. Everyone needs their space. It's fine. Thirdly, you need to recognize what boundaries you would like to set in place. What are your needs and wants? Please know boundaries are set for friends, or excuse me, please know boundaries you set for friends may look different for family and partners. Again, kind of like how you might be very close to your family and you can give them hugs, but you don't necessarily do that with friends. That's all right. Some aspects of boundaries that you may need to look at are related to, again, your physical space, your emotional space, your personal boundaries, and all of that. This could be at home, this could be at work, this could be in the gym, whatever it is. So we can have boundaries in every aspect of our life. That doesn't mean that these are going to cut people off or keep people away from you, but rather it's allowing you to protect what is important to you so that you can still be happy, be rested, be prepared and ready for the day, all of that. Okay. And lastly, communicate your boundaries in a respectful manner and respect others' boundaries. So it's one thing to yell at someone, and then it's another to say, hey, please knock on the door and announce yourself before you come into my office. whatever it may be. And then that part of respecting others' boundaries. If you're going to have boundaries, the other person is going to have them too, or at least they should. So it's not just a one-way thing. With all of this, here are some last questions to think about and consider. How did you learn about boundaries? Right. I had mentioned throughout our time that there are some things that we learned in our family, and that's simply because we grew up with them. We were around them typically for 16, 17 years. They brought in what they learned from their families, their own experiences. So oftentimes that's a good place to start first. But also, we may have been in these negative, traumatic situations. So our boundaries may have not been our own decision. They could have been kind of forced on us to be very aware of how we are feeling and making sure that people do not cross these lines. So, how did you learn about your boundaries? Second question to think about is, when did you realize you needed stronger or healthier boundaries? This may mean that you were very close with your friends, and then one of those friends went out and told all of your secrets to other people, and you didn't think that was going to happen. So, unfortunately, you learned this because you had that friend in elementary, middle school, high school that went out and told everything. What kind of boundaries did you have growing up? So that looks very different from as a kid than as an adult, which hopefully has changed between that time, whether it's with your parents or siblings or in certain environments that you've been in. So it's looking at that. What kind of boundaries did you have growing up? But then on the other side, looking at what do your boundaries look like in your life now? Hopefully they've changed. Maybe they've gotten stronger. Odds are you've had to establish more boundaries because now you have your own money, or you are paying for all these things on your own, like your car or your apartment, whatever it is. So things will look a little bit different when you are a young adult or even as a middle-aged woman or older. So things change, and that's okay. Your boundaries may have gotten stronger, or you might have even lightened them up. They may have been rules before and they're boundaries now. So, some things just to look at and reflect on so that you can determine what may need to change, whether it's, again, having stronger boundaries or lessening some of these rules and hard lines that you might have. All right. So, thank you again. My name is Taylor Mountain, and this is Harmony Unlocked. And I'm currently accepting new clients for the Assertive Life Accelerator program. So, this was created to empower you to feel supported, to stop people pleasing, and enhance your fulfillment. It guides you to effectively channel your energy, build meaningful connections, confidently say no, and gain greater control over your life. So sign up today at www.taylormountain.com for a free consultation, and make sure that you mention the word radio for a 10% discount. That is all that I have for you today, and this is Harmony Unlocked. Have a great day. All right, that is the end for that. But as I was talking through this, I realized that there does need to be a trigger warning for boundaries. So I'm going to restate what I did in the beginning with my opening so that people will know what we are talking about and then be prepared so that they won't be triggered or reminded of some of these negative things that have happened in the past. All right, so I will start now in 3, 2, 1. Hi, you're listening to Harmony Unlocked, where I help you find a perfect balance between work, life, and love. This is Taylor Mountain, and I am the host of this show. Now, today's episode is called Understanding Boundaries. Boundaries are something that all of us need. They can be healthy or unhealthy. And so, what we'll talk about today are healthy boundaries, the different types of boundaries, what they may sound like as we create them, and how we may need to strengthen them, or sometimes if there are rules and hard lines that we might need to lessen those. All right. I messed that up. So let's do that one again, please. So I'm doing the entry again. This is the second time. In 3, 2, 1. Hi, you're listening to Harmony Unlocked, where I help you find a perfect balance between work, life, and love. This is Taylor Mountain, and I am the host of today's show. Now, today's episode is called Understanding Boundaries. We're going to look at the definition of boundaries, why they're important, the different types of boundaries, and how you might say them. Oh my gosh, I am so sorry, Dan. I'm going to get this right. I'm just driving myself nuts at this moment. All right, here we go. I got this. Third time. All right. 3, 2, 1. Hi, you're listening to Harmony Unlocked, where I help you find a perfect balance between work, life, and love. This is Taylor Mountain, and I am the host of the show. Today's episode is called Understanding Boundaries. In today's episode, we will be looking at the definition of boundaries, the different types of boundaries, and how we can set strong, good, effective boundaries. Now, the topic today, I will say there is a trigger warning because we'll be talking about the sexual boundaries and sometimes what may be needed with those boundaries. So, want to let you know about that. It is an important topic, but also we'll give you another trigger warning when we do start to talk about that particular topic. All right, so let's get into it. Okay, and then also if you need a statement about kind of that trigger warning and where I'll be starting to talk about the sexual boundaries part, then I will say that now in 3, 2, 1. Now, here we are talking about the different types of boundaries. And as I mentioned before, we're going to get into some topics that might be a little bit challenging. So I want to let you know that you can stop here and pick up later on if you'd like to, or something like that. Sorry, Dan. All right. I can do this, right? All right, Dan. Friend. Okay, here I am. Here I'm doing this. Okay, this is what I'm going to say. Sorry, here's the second time. All right. 3, 2, 1. Now, we have been talking some about these different types of boundaries, but I did mention at the start of today's episode that we would be talking about some sensitive topics. So I want to let you know that this is a period where we'll be talking about this topic a little on and off for the remainder of the episode. So it is okay to stop here and hopefully you join us next time. All right. So now we're looking at sexual boundaries. All right, Dan, I think that is it. Thank you. And uh, yeah, that's it.